All right. Good afternoon, guys. I'm Brittany Fisher, and I'm here to introduce our next speaker, Prerana Dalal. And she is the Director of Product Strategy at Huge, a user centric digital agency. She helps companies to transform into trusted parts of people's lives by creating digital products, services, and brands that people love. Prerna holds a bachelor's degree in informational science and technology from Penn State and an MBA from the University of Maryland. Living and working in DC, Prerna is a self proclaimed foodie, loves the Oxford comma, and enjoys watching Bravo shows.
So good.
Me too. The title of Prerna's talk today is How to Make Product That Users Love. Please help me to welcome Prerna Dalal.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Mic is good. If you guys want to talk about the scandal later, I'm happy to. Big fan of Bravo. Um, Figure to start out, right? You guys are all entrepreneurs, or you have an idea. Maybe you're started. Maybe you're probably a couple phases in, but that's super exciting, right? So you have this idea. You're probably coming up with, like, what is it going to look like? What is it going to do? How is it going to work? Um, But there's actually a problem with that, right? Of focusing on the solution first. And really what we're here to do is talk about how to make products users love. And so, as mentioned, I'm Prerna. I have launched and in some cases relaunched dozens of products across a bunch of different industries. And I think at the end of the day, there's a couple things that really come to mind. And I do focus on digital products. Hopefully this does still resonate for those that might not just be a digital product, right? Be it an app, a website, or software of some kind. But it's really about how to tackle an idea. So case in point, and yes, this reference is dated, but my God, it couldn't be a better example. So if you guys remember the Segway, hopefully everyone remembers the Segway, it was meant to be this technology revolution that was supposed to change the way individuals traveled and change the design of cities. But how we know it now is mostly just the method of choice for mall cops and city tours. And the question is really, how did it go from this technological marvel to kind of a punchline? And the problem is that it was a solution first approach, right? It focused on the technology, it focused how cool it was. And if you actually, when it hit the market, it was actually about $5,000 to purchase it. So if you had the expendable funds to actually purchase it, the novelty wore off pretty quickly because users found out that, like, it didn't actually go that fast. It was super clunky. You really couldn't get anywhere. It was like just not a great product. What it didn't do was actually focus on the problem. And if this was to become the individual's method of choice for transportation, if you think about the problem, say you lived in New York City, you were on a 5-story walk up, right? This thing was so heavy, you were not going to carry it upstairs, right? It didn't really solve any problems in terms of storage. And C, it was also really, really expensive. So how do you actually focus on the problem? And the idea is to become an anthropologist, right? Yes, you guys are already entrepreneurs, but I'm also adding another thing to your list, is becoming an anthropologist. And really what that means is to really get to know your users, right? You do that by immersing yourself in the problem. You do all the research. You talk to people, right? You talk to people that you think are obvious users and also non-obvious users. You know everything you can as much as you can. You understand the issues they're having, the pain points, even the emotions that people are following, and mapping out a journey. So you can really embody your end consumers, your end users, to understand really what problem that you are solving for. And with that, you end up with user personas. The really popular thing is usually a market profile, right? That is your demographics, like age and location, geography, maybe someone's title, but I'm talking about behavioral archetypes here. And with that, I mean behaviors, their motivation. How are they using a product or service currently, right? And all of this is used based on user interviews or stakeholder research, right? In my job, I actually spend quite a lot of time on research, right? That means not just talking to people, but I work with clients, I'm talking to stakeholders as well, but also doing desk research, right? Looking at data, looking at information, doing competitive market research, just looking at everyone that's out there in the market that I'm trying to get to. If this is something that's going in as an existing market, right? To figure out everything I could possibly know and where there are gaps. Really? And with that, then I start to define the problem. And by the problem, what I mean is what's actually going around the user, right? And the organization that they might be a part of, right? What do they need or what are they missing? What are the relevant trends shaping perception, right? Like the Segway, not so relevant anymore, but there's still always a problem of people trying to get from point A to point B, right? And what is actually changing about that that is still trendy, right? That's changing perception and behaviors in our consumers. And then where are the gaps, right? What's actually missing from all of that? So this is this thing. So once you actually have your problem, right? Your unspoken, unmet user need, right? You're trying to identify what they want and what they need but aren't saying. Because let me tell you the amount of times people don't actually know what they want, right? They can say one thing but mean another because a lot of people can't articulate really what the problem is. And that is why it's important to focus on the problem and not the solution of what people are saying, right? And that's why you do your research and look around and not just focus in on a single thing. Wrong direction. With that, that gives you the real opportunity, right? What are the problem you're actually solving for? And then you get to your brand or your organization or your company, right? Your capability and ambition, right? What can you or we do better than anyone else? For some reason, this thing is called Troika. I admittedly don't know why. I even tried Googling this. This is actually something I learned from another strategy manager of mine years ago. And when you put all those things together, you get your strategy, right? And this is the three things that you should always be able to articulate no matter where you are, right? If you're in pitch for your pitches, for your value proposition, these are the three things you should always be able to identify to anyone at any given time. And with that, you get a strategy statement, right? So it's to achieve your business goal, create what is the product, so what's your idea, what you're trying to do, for who's your persona, who's the primary person that you're going after, and that provides what benefit are they getting, by what are the attributes of the product or how the benefits are received, right? This is a really strong, super strong statement. It should be pretty short that you can rattle off. It's clearly a sentence, right? And this is the thing that should always lead all the decisions that you are making going forward, right? It's always coming back to this. Because I think when you get in the moment and you're excited and you're solutioning and you're coming up with ideas and you're trying to solve things for people, it's really easy to deviate from the original path and forget about the problem. So that's why it's pretty strong, or it's pretty important to have something like a strategy statement so you always know what to return back to. So finally, now that you know your users and you have your strategy statement, we can finally talk about solution. Yay. Hopefully you guys have seen the business model canvas. If not, right, the idea behind this is an organizing way to figure out who your partners are, the activities, the resources, how you're going to go to market, what is your overall value proposition, the relationships for your customers, your support structure, segments, your revenue streams. But that's for like your overall larger business. There is another one called the product canvas. So again, this is pretty typical for digital products, but not to say that you can't use it for anything and everything. You can actually Google this. I took this from Roman Pitchler. But the idea is this is again, another organizing way to really think about your product, right? What you're going to call it. What are the goals? A lot of this stuff will come from your strategy statement. Metrics. How are you going to measure success? How are you going to measure your learnings? How are you going to measure what you're going to continue forward with? And it shouldn't just be engagement or people buying your product, right? That's not enough. You need to learn, as you guys are going into market, more than just that. What behaviors are you trying to change? What impact are you looking for? Your target group, which is your personas. You can have usually more than one. Always pick one to start with, because if you're trying to be everything to everyone, you're nothing to no one. And then your big picture. What is the big idea? And break it down into different features and functionalities in your product details. So with all of that, right, product strategy, which is what I do, is getting the right product to the right user in the right way with the least amount of risk, right? Which is a lot of decisions to make, and it can be a little scary because you don't want to make mistakes and lose a lot of like capital if you put a lot of time and effort into it. So product strategy is really bringing a lot of that stuff together, right? We talked about the users. We have a little bit of your business with your business model canvas, and your design and tech is your kind of solution, if you will, right? So the idea is you don't need to do everything all at once. Let's get to market pretty quickly. And you do that with a minimum viable product, right? Which is defined as a version of product with just enough features to be usable by early customers who can then provide feedback for future product development, right? This is when people say they were prototyping, and that can be on paper. It can just be images that you're clicking through, right? To kind of get feedback and get people's reactions. But eventually that MVP will also hit market and go into production. And the problem is that a lot of people think this is how it works, right? You start off with something super simple, and eventually you end up with a racehorse that's in detail at the end, right? But that's not really the case. What you want to do is build more like this, right? So again, I'm right on that transformation or transportation analogy, right? I'm trying to get to point A to point B. Technically, all of these will get you there, right? But a skateboard is a lot easier to build than a car, obviously. And the point is that at each stage, I'm always providing value to my customers. I'm always solving a problem. I'm always helping a need, right? Certainly a skateboard will get me to point A to point B. Do I want to be skateboarding? Not always. Personally, I can't skateboard. So, I mean, how do you get from this point to the end point? The bigger problem with all of this is that users are actually have really high expectations, right? Technology is everywhere these days. We all use products. There's known patterns and known expectations. And so even if you're in a brand new industry and you're being a disruptor and an innovator, right? People still have really high expectations. It gets a lot harder to gain traction in a market because people just want more than they used to. And that's a little bit in kind of where we are in society at this moment, right? It's the instant era. You guys know this. You guys know this, right? You make my life harder as a product manager, right? With the idea that there is immediacy and ubiquitous access to everything all at once, right? Because I think the standards have just gotten so much higher than they used to be. Case in point, right? People just have no chill. Like 1 in 4 people will abandon a website if it takes more than 4 seconds to load, right? On the same level of performance, Amazon would lose 1.6 billion in a year because of a 1-second website delay, right? And even to take this to like just personal things, like 46% of Americans are willing to skip the theater or rentals for private movies because they want things sooner, they want things faster, they have higher standards than they used to. And so this is really becomes into becoming more thoughtful, right? This is actually from Interaction Design. A product is bought to be used, right? It has to satisfy certain criteria, not only functional, but also physiological and aesthetic, right? And the way that this actually comes to fruition is because you know your users, you know their emotions, you know their needs, which is how you can get to not just functionality, but physiological and aesthetic needs, right? And good design emphasizes the usefulness of something while taking away distractions to really keep people engaged in your product. So when we say MVP, right, it's not just about doing the bare minimum. It's finding that little sliver that kind of does a little bit of everything, right? It's functional, it's reliable, it's usable, and it has an empathetic design. But I'm going to add a little bit to this, and I'm going to say add a little bit of fun to this, right? This, I think, is really what makes something lovable, is adding a little bit of fun, adding surprise and delight into your products. And really what that does is you're kind of playing on any customer's desire for something that's exciting, for recognition, for an individuality, right? The more I can see myself in a product, the more that I kind of get, I kind of buy into it a little bit more, right? I want to use it. It becomes a part of me. And so then I become more of a loyal customer. And I actually put this is actually one of my favorite things to do, is adding little bits of surprise and delight. So even though we're saying minimum, right, the minimum and minimal viable product, it doesn't mean that you can't have a little fun with it, right? So Easter eggs, Easter egg features. Google is known for this, right? They have a huge history of hiding little animations and graphics when you search something. Way back then, I still remember this. This is the benefit of having a surprise and delight of back in the GChat days. I know they phased that out as a product. You used to be able to put in little special codes and get like a dinosaur running across the screen, right? And it's those moments of like you're in the know, right? And you feel special and you get more invested in that product. And you start telling your friends about it. Be like, oh, this is cool. Like, do you see this little thing? You feel cool about it. And that's how the word starts to spread, is in little moments like that. In fact, if you actually Google Easter eggs, there's actually dozens and dozens of articles of like those tiny moments of surprise and delight of like the best Easter eggs. So in of itself, it becomes a marketing feature because people are talking about it. They write articles about it, and it becomes a known thing. Another one is lovable services, right? Not everything has to be a product feature. Chewy does a great job of this. So if your companion has passed away, they will actually refund your money and send flowers as well. Oh no. And we're back. And send flowers as well. And so people are posting this on Twitter, right? It's a moment where you're engaging with your customers. It's a surprise. It's not going to happen every day, right? Hopefully. And they also suggested donating the food to a local shelter as well, right? So another way of, it's not expected. You're not using it very often, but it's a memorable thing that people will talk about. Other ones are also surprise events. Telfar, super popular fashion brand. Their bags sell out in like seconds, but they surprise their fans during Fashion Week in 2022. And just 2 days before, they made an Instagram announcement and said, hey, we're going to do a pop-up shop for all your fashion lovers who are all in town because it's Fashion Week to go get, I think, up to 5 bags in any color and size, right? So again, you're generating this momentum because people are talking about it. It's not something you have to do every single time. And you can certainly start small, right? Even with like just a feature Easter egg, and eventually move your way up to bigger things like a full-on services and events. But it's those moments that really people remember, and those are the ones that talk about. And that's where you get lovable products, is when they have a personal experience with you and your brand and your product. And in ways that they actually want to tell other people to kind of bring people into their realm and their love for it as well. And so this is actually pretty short. So we're going to put it all together. Right? So you have the final equation. So you have your user need. You're going to know your users better than anyone. You're going to have personas, and you're going to break it down by type. You're going to have your solution. That's your design, your technology, your service, your business model, whatever that might be, with a little bit of fun added in the top corner, right? A little exponent, if I remember algebra correctly. That makes something memorable. And then you'll have your business and your brand as well. I didn't talk a lot about brand. I'm not a brand expert, but though I do love brand. And brand is not just its visual identity, but also how you're talking to people in your communication, how you show up, and always making sure that those things ladder back to your statement as well, your product statement of who you are and being consistent in all of that, because that is what people are looking for. They're looking for consistency, something memorable, and also something functional. And at the end of the day, that's really what creates experiences and products that people love, right? When people can see themselves within a brand, within a product, and you're doing so consistently. So, and that, now go make shit that users love. Pretty simple. Any questions? Happy to open up. Thank you.
So we'll be taking questions at this time. Anybody like to start?
Hello. If you go back a slide, could you walk through an example of a product that you launched and
Yeah.
kind of the process
Oh,
and
that's
what it was?
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, it's a product that I helped launch. I'll do something that's not just a digital product. So I had a client that wanted to launch a food hall in New York, right? And the thing that made them, because I mean, food halls, not that special. There's lots of them. So what kind of made them super interesting? What was their differentiator? So they kind of looked at their user needs. They opened up an area that's a little bit of a food desert, right? Kind of surprising in New York, right? You think there's food everywhere, but there's still certain neighborhoods that didn't have a lot of, in their case, a lot of upscale places to eat. And their business model was interesting because what they did was they put like 12 restaurants and a gourmet grocery store all underneath the same roof, right? And the best part is that unlike most food halls, right, you have to pay individually at each restaurant and the grocery store. In this case, you do not. You can go anywhere that you want and pay with just once. So that was the unmet need, and that was the differentiator for them. Is that if I wanted pizza and dumplings, I don't have to go to two different. Well, I still go to two different places. It's under one roof, but I don't have to check out twice. And then on top of that, there's services. If you went to the restaurant and you really like those dumplings, you can also buy it in the gourmet grocery store too, right? So that's where they started creating that uniqueness, the interconnectivity between their services. Now, from a digital perspective, right, we were asked to create an app for them that supported all of this, right? And so this is where you get into a little bit of your solution and your design and your technology too, right? Again, this is a known thing. People have they have their habits. And the question was, why am I going to download yet another app for this one specific place when I have things like DoorDash and Uber Eats and I can just order things and it will get to me, right? So our product still made sure that I could order food, my groceries and my restaurant, made sure that from an industry perspective that it matched that functionality. So this is where I was getting to, there's just a higher level of standard because of known products out there. I couldn't just do a really bare minimum ordering food, right? Again, why would people use this over DoorDash or Uber Eats? So I had to raise to that standard, and then I emphasized the interesting thing about them, right? Is that I was putting together both grocery and restaurant food at the same time, right? So it was elevating. All right, cool. Oh, you just ordered these dumplings? Well, let me recommend that restaurant as well, and being like, hey, there's a reservation. If you don't want to order it right now, there's a reservation coming up in like an hour, right? If you want to do that instead. Or if we're in the reverse case, right, there's a restaurant and like you can't get a reservation, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You can still order the food and get it to you, i.e. ready or frozen from our grocery store as well, right? So like those are the moments where that's where we kind of emphasize the unmet need for folks, is that like people didn't want to go to two different places to order things, right? And I'm taking advantage of their business advantage of being all underneath one roof and just having to pay once. And they also had events and things like that. It was also for a celebrity chef. You can probably start guessing who this is if you start Googling things, right? So we emphasize a lot of those things as well, of putting in video content of the celebrity chef as well, because he curated all the menus and elevating events and started tying a lot of these things together that if I was a first-time user who walked in the store, I might not know all of those things. But if I downloaded the app, it starts doing some of those things for me, right? In terms of fun, what fun did we add? Actually, our fun was probably a little bit more, is on a more subtle note. I think it was just, we were a little bit cheekier in how we were writing things, right? And just the messaging and stuff like that. I think we also would throw in like a surprise, like reward of some kind as well. And things like that to kind of, to keep things exciting, even though it's just food ordering and you're just trying to satisfy a need of, I am hungry. And so I think and then the business and brand that I talked about as well. they had a very strong physical brand, like in the store, the aesthetics of like, it was supposed to be like very vintage and elevated and elegant. So when we were doing our design as well, we wanted to make sure that that continuation happened in the app as well, right? So that every touch point that a user had was always consistent. So even if I wasn't in a physical place where I was surrounded by this beautiful architecture and all the beautiful finishes and these gold touches here and there on the handles and on the light fixtures, you still got that feeling when you got into the app as well, right? It wasn't a wholly separated experience. It wasn't just about colors, but it was the font that we picked, the spacing that we picked, just kind of how things showed up. We stayed away from very like modern, clean digital and just kind of kept it very, very elegant. So that users did get that consistent experience.
What are some of the best ways to survey your potential users' needs?
Yeah, honestly, just start talking to people, right? The amount of people that I mean, start with your friends. Even some of the projects I'm working on today with some of my clients, I have the fortune of having a research team. That is great, right? But I was actually just talking to a friend of mine, and it turns out that she uses the product that I'm working on, and we just started having a conversation, right? And so I just started talking to people around me. And you'd be surprised how willing people are to just give their opinions. That's actually not a hard thing, is to get people talking. When you're doing those interviews, always make sure you're asking open-ended questions, right? You're never solving anything for them. You're kind of asking things, not just like, what would you do differently, but tell me about how you get here. How did you discover something? Why are you making these choices? How do you feel about this? What do you wish was better? And start from there. There's also a lot of really great tools out there nowadays that makes it a lot easier to prototype as well. Or test prototypes. I know one that we use is usertesting.com, which is actually pretty easy. I don't remember the pricing model off the top of my head, but if you're not sure how to do research, you can, I think everyone here, they will take anyone. You can sign up to be a user tester as well. And that is actually a great way, and a little bit how I learned as well, of like seeing and understanding the types of questions people are asking and what they're asking, how they're asking them, and kind of sometimes seeing new products, features coming up before they actually hit market too. And it's a great way to kind of get yourself familiar with at least digital products, right, in that case. So yeah, I mean, start small. Start with anyone around you. Talk to friends, neighbors, family members, and start going from there. Like it's amazing. Like there's a lot of like, you can post things on Reddit and people will respond to stuff, and like forums and things like that. We've for a project of mine, we were looking for a very specific group of people, which is it's around federal grants, and folks who have never applied to federal grants. That's not something you can just generally find off on the street, because they also had to be an organization, right? So we actually ended up, we found a YouTube video of someone explaining how the federal grants process works, and we started combing through the people making comments, right? And being like, and seeing what they were saying, and it's a little weird, right? And started reaching out to them, be like, hey, I'm doing some research. I'd love to talk to you if you're willing to give me 30 minutes of your time just to ask some questions. You can send out surveys, right? Google Forms, Typeform. They can all be beautifully branded things so that it still feels like it's an official thing, but send it out to people and post it in places and get feedback from folks. Yeah, there's a lot of, like, you can get creative with it. It doesn't have to be like a full research team and a whole plan. I have to do that for my clients because they want to know our methodology and what they're kind of getting out of things. But yeah, you can get pretty creative and do some guerrilla research. Oh, also, there's just lots of data on the internet these days, right, of behaviors and lots of standards and things like that. We're back. Right, Gartner is a pretty big one. Nielsen is another brand. A lot of them have paid products, but they're also constantly publishing free articles about trends and behaviors and where things are going within an industry. I think we
have a question from online, from a Zoom attendee. What is a product from your childhood you would love to innovate for today?
Oh, that's a good one. What's a product that I would, from my childhood, that I would innovate today? I mean, this is a hard question because I'm going to date myself. There was not technology when in my childhood, right? I remember the days pre-internet. So yeah, there's that. So yay. For my childhood, woof. I don't know about innovating, but I honestly, things I would bring back. I think there were just really simple games back in the day. I would just love to bring those things back because I think there's a, such a nerd. I love this game called Math Munchers, right? And it just kind of taught you how to do math, and you played a game, and it was super simple, right? And it was fun, and it was kind of campy. But I think a lot of those things I would actually bring back because I think a lot of things are kind of overinflated and over designed, and the simplicity of that was just so wonderful. I'm getting a little nostalgic. I'm actually going to think about that a little bit more and maybe come back to it because that's a really good question and I've never thought about it. I always joke that the internet's kind of ruined for me because I can't look at anything anymore without being like, ooh, what does this do? How does this work? Case in point, I was traveling with my friends. We were in Amsterdam. We went to a museum. They had a free product to do the tour, to do a museum tour. And everyone else is looking at the artwork and like pointing their camera to the artwork, and it would pop up with the features. And I'm sitting here spending more time on the features of like, it tracks where I'm going, what it's doing, it knows where I am, it can give me additional information about the artwork that's not just written on the wall. So yeah, I was like, in a way, the internet's a little ruined for me because I can't ever stop thinking about how to make something a little bit better or what doesn't work, or like the HBO Go app is the worst thing in the world and it constantly crashes and I complain about it regularly to my coworkers. So that is my life. I think there was another hand over. Oh, there's one
Yeah,
right
I
there
think
now.
I have the mic. Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for this equation. I really like this. I had a question on how you gauge the success of a feature in a product. I feel like there are two broad types of features. One, that the wisdom of the user sort of already knows, in the sense that, you change the color of your web page from, say, purple to blue, and they're like, okay, wow. And there's a second set of features that they possibly don't know about at all, and then they're like, wow, this can be done. Like, so which of these two do you think is more successful in your experience?
I don't think there's one that's more successful than the other, right? I think what it goes back to is this, right? It goes back to your strategy statement of what you are trying to achieve and how you're going to get there, right? So that's what you really should be setting your metrics around, right? And this can apply to either of those situations, right? Like changing a color of a website, right? Why am I doing that, right? I mean, to change a color, it's not an immeasurable amount of work to do. If it's just a small website, right, just might be a simple like change a hex code, right? If it's a bigger product that's been in production for a while, you'll probably have to do a lot of testing, a lot of smoke testing, make sure it doesn't break anything, make sure you got that color purple everywhere, especially if you're not using global styles. Let me tell you, people don't know use global styles, right? But why am I changing that color purple? What am I trying to do? What problem am I solving for, right? Is it that people are like, you know what, your brand isn't coming through, right? So I'm changing this color so that I show up a little bit more. So I'm probably going to see if I can measure brand affinity. Are people more likely to engage with my brand now that I've changed the colors, right? Could it be an accessibility issue, right? When you're thinking about products, you have to think about all of your users as well, right? So if I change something to purple, is it still accessible? Or did I change it because it wasn't accessible before? Does it still pass muster, right? So I think it really comes back to your strategy statement of what you're trying to do and making sure that your metrics line up to it. That's why this is so important. If you can't articulate this, it's going to impact everything else around you, right? If you don't know this, right, it's going to be hard to know which decisions to make when, right? And also to say that it doesn't mean that this can't change either, right? If you have this and you try something out and it's not working and you get feedback, then it probably means you need to change this as well, right? And this should evolve. And it will evolve over time because as you gain customers, as people use your products, as people find new ways to use your products that you didn't even know about, right? This might change a little bit as well. But you need to start somewhere, and this is it. I got another question right there.
So after you have built V0 of your product and you have customers who are using it, how do you, or I guess what I think is challenging is prioritizing what features to build and add next and working out a process that helps you with that.
Yep.
Can you speak to like a framework or process that has really helped you with that?
Yeah. So my favorite framework, and I use this on everyone, right? For any first, list out all your features, right? Everything that you want to do, big or small. And then I put it on a scale of 1 to 5 and measured against 3 things. First one being user needs. How much does this improve the experience for my users? How much does this improve an experience, an unmet need, right? How much does it push that needle? The second one is business strategy, right? How much does this push the needle against whatever business goal that I have, right? A new one, an enhanced one, a changed one, right? A modified one, whatever that might be. And then also operational readiness. How ready are you to actually realize this feature? And that includes both technology, right? So like, do I have the right technology in place to do this? Do I have to do any, find new vendors, find new technology, do a platform upgrade, find something new that doesn't exist. Also from business operations as well, right? If you're offering a new service, do you have all the things in place to actually support that feature before it rolls out to the users, right? So like in large organizations, they're like, hey, we want to start providing this new service, and it's going to require new marketing content, a new business model. I have to get the lawyers to approve off on it. I need finance to approve off on it, right? All those decisions as well kind of goes under operational readiness. And you mark all of those from 1 to 5, 1 being lowest, 5 being the most. And that's probably the easiest way to quantify your features. And then at some point, there's a little bit of gut instinct in there too, right? You're going to take a little bit of a risk. I think those who are probably the most risk averse, you're not going to see huge jumps and huge leaps in the growth of your business. Sometimes it's a little bit of build it and they will come kind of moment, but always rooted in some sort of research or data point or something like that. So it's not just a shot in the dark. And so, yeah, it's like, that's probably that's the way I quantify it. And then I do something called a Moscow, which is a must, should, could, won't have, whenever I'm prioritizing something for, like, say, the next release. That's, like I said, that's probably that's the tried and true method that I use for almost anything. And there's always a little bit of nuance, right? And you can adapt what that definition means for your specific business.
So for like a product or something that needs the user to be educated about it, what would you strive for? A larger audience that have somewhat knowledge, or a smaller audience that can use the product to its fullest efficiency or like fullest use?
Mm-hmm. I think so. When it comes to users, you're always going to get power users. They're always going to be your like in the bell curve, right, of standard deviation. Oh Lord, now I'm trying to remember standard deviation statistics. I'm doing this to myself, right? They're always going to be your top percentage and a smaller percent. Then you'll have the normal people that probably use like 50 to 70% of your product, and then you'll have the tail end that really, really doesn't, right? That probably just uses it occasionally, once in a while, right? Generally, what I have found, and this is a blanket statement, and I'm making a huge generalization, is that I tend to appeal to the casual user first. The idea being that a rising tide rises all boats, right? Because the thing about the power user is that they're probably going to go figure it out anyway, right? I was like, if you get the If you get the innovators and the disruptors and the first adapters, right, they're probably going to go do that anyway, right? But getting that middle section and maybe some of the casual users, that's where you really start kind of elevating the experience for everyone. But you can't forget, at the same time, you can't forget about those power users either, right? So I think like you just kind of, like I tend to alternate, but it also goes back to, again, my strategy statement, right? If my statement right now is to tap into a brand new market, right, then I'm going to focus a lot of my efforts on that new set of users who don't know anything that I probably need to educate, because my goal is find a new market segment, right? If my goal is to improve the experience for my top users because I want to seek retention and I want to seek loyalty and I want to seek repeat engagement, then I'm going to appeal to those expert users to make sure that they stick around, right? And that's where I said, like, I probably tend to alternate, because if you just focus on one thing for too long, you don't want to lose people, right? So you do a little bit of everything. But in that moment, focus on one user group. When you're done, when you think that that experiment is out in production and you're figuring things out, then move on to the next one, right? And that's kind of how you build a user group. Are there any more questions online? I'm still thinking about my favorite product from childhood that I want to innovate on. This one's killing me. Nope. All right. Anyone in the room?
I guess I might have one question.
Oh, yeah.
Actually. Yeah. So you're talking about launching like an MVP.
Mhm.
Would you rather, I guess it probably depends on the product, but would you rather see it launched in market or launched to just a beta tester group?
I say always do a beta test first, because I think what you find with that, A, it's a little bit more controllable. B, it's a little bit of a safer option, right? It can be a little bit messier, and it's a good trial, right? You'll figure out the kinks, what's working, what isn't working, right? And it's a great way to validate before you just go nuts and launch to everyone, right? It's one of those moments where no matter how many creative ways you think about breaking your system, someone who's not you, because you're so ingrained in it, you know everything about it, you inherently develop biases for your own product, that once you throw it to a beta group, you're like, oh, I was not expecting someone to go do that. I didn't even know you could do that. Someone's not even pressing that button. They went over here instead, right? I think, and that's the benefit of a beta group. And again, it doesn't have to be a very long experiment. It can be pretty short. It can be a small product. But just getting other eyes on things is when you start discovering how people, if they're perceiving and using it the way that you intended, and if not, why, right? That's why we do a lot of usability tests as well, and they're moderated. So I might put something in front of someone and ask them, all right, do this. How do you think that would happen? What would you expect to happen? Why are you using it that way? To kind of get that narration that someone is thinking, as opposed to just focusing on analytics. I think analytics are great. I think there's a big trend of people moving towards data, towards big data. But I think there is always something to be said about usability testing from a qualitative as opposed to just quantitative. Like one of the biggest pet peeves I have is Amazon, right? Amazon, great product, right? I can't tell you how many people are like, why can't we just be like Amazon? If you ask any designer, they hate Amazon. It's a terrible user experience. You can't actually find anything, but people put up with it because it's a good business model, right? The product actually isn't their website. It's about actually getting your products to you faster, right? It's that 2-day shipping, right? It's the variety. And people put up with that because of all the extra stuff that makes it better, right? They've actually become successful not around their digital product, but because they figured out how to operationalize getting products to people faster, right? And that's the moment where it's just like, if I just looked at data, I would end up with an Amazon site. If I looked at data plus qualitative research with my beta testers, I would get an even more usable product. Like my personal favorite is Slack. I don't know if you guys have used it. It's a communication thing. Love it. Been a big fan of it for years, right? And they do a lot of research as well. It's not the sexiest looking product, but it has really cool functionality that actually helps users because they do that research. And I also sign up for the beta testing, so I get first releases. Like I said, I'm a nerd. Any other questions? Mhm. Yep. Mhm. Sure. So the question is, so for folks online, the question is, Slack is a great product, but you have Microsoft Teams that technically has more market share, right? I would also argue that that actually doesn't take away from the good product that Slack is, because I think it serves a different need that Teams doesn't. I actually use both at work. I hate Teams, right? You can't find anything. If you just think of it as a tool to communicate with someone, right, send messages back and forth, it does that, right? But if you're thinking about file storage and finding things and workflow and all the integrations that Slack has, but Teams doesn't, then it's actually a worse product, right? And it's hard to actually make the comparison between the two because Microsoft is actually a much larger product, right? It has the whole suite of everything else. And the reason why they tend to win is also because they're like, hey, we can give you Microsoft Teams because you have the whole Microsoft suite offices for businesses, right? You have the Outlook, you have Office and everything like that. Actually, at my company, we use Google, like Google Slides and Docs mostly. And we use Slack because it's an easier way to track conversations. It's easier for collaboration. You can organize different channels by topics and save files and things like that. So it becomes more usable for us over Teams. Actually, if you use Teams, I know for a fact people use a lot of workarounds, right? Because they actually don't like the product. So just because it has market share doesn't always mean it's a great product, right? The reason they have market share is probably for other reasons. And I will also say that just because you don't have all the market share does not mean it's not a successful product, right? I think you can still be small and still be successful and have cult followings and have really engaged users and people willing to pay for your product. Even if it's lesser, you might even have better profit margins and more revenue at the end of the day, even from a smaller set of users. It's really in the math.
Cool. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you to Prerana again
Thank
for
you,
your
everyone.
time.